How could two trained Marines, armed with precision gear, scopes, and months of expert instruction, keep missing their mark, while an old man with a cane nailed a bullseye on his very first try? The firing range at Camp Lejeune buzzed with tension. Targets sat 800 yards out, tiny black dots barely visible against the pale earth of the berm. Shots rang out in sharp bursts, echoing across the dusty field, but disappointment followed each one. The paper targets showed holes far from center, or worse, none at all. A haze of gunpowder clung to the thick afternoon air. Two young Marines lowered their rifles, frustration etched into their movements. "Damn it," Lance Corporal Ethan Ward muttered, slamming his bolt shut harder than necessary. Sweat trickled down his temple and into his eyes, but he didn't flinch. He swiped it away with a gritty sleeve, smearing dirt across his cheek. Beside him, Sergeant Daniel Price adjusted his spotting scope, lips pressed into a hard line. "You're pulling left again. Every single shot," he said, his voice clipped, tight with irritation. Ethan turned toward him, his expression sharp. "Don't start with me. You missed the last three too." Daniel let out a slow breath, trying not to escalate. They weren't fresh recruits anymore. They'd been through hellish training, lived inside ballistics charts, memorized wind tables. They should have had this down cold. A few paces behind them, their instructor barked, "Read the wind, Ward." "Price, same for you. Targets don't shoot themselves." Both Marines gritted their teeth. Reading wind was the eternal thorn in their side. The range flag barely stirred, but the shimmering mirage just above the ground warped the view, distorting even the smallest adjustments. Any miscalculation meant a miss, plain and simple. Ethan tweaked his scope, muttering, "Feels like the damn wind's messing with us on purpose." Daniel gave a dry chuckle. "Yeah, well, the Corps doesn't hand out ribbons for trying. We've got to crack this." The weight of the day settled heavier with every missed shot. Most of the other Marines had packed up and gone, but these two remained, stubborn, frustrated, pride on the line. The background chatter of rifles had quieted. All that remained was the occasional snap of wind tugging at the limp flag. Ethan peered through his scope again. Calculations. Charts. Wind readings. None of it seemed to land a shot. "It's like we're missing something," he muttered. Daniel leaned back slightly, scanning the tree line beyond the targets. "Yeah, something's off. We're not seeing it." The instructor called out, 10-minute reset. "Recalibrate your gear." His voice held that edge of authority, but underneath it, disappointment. Ethan dropped onto his ammo can, tugging off his hat and wiping the sweat from his buzzed hair. "We could sit out here until sundown. It wouldn't matter. Feels like the harder I try, the worse I get." Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared down at the M40A6 in his hands, the same rifle they'd trained with for months. His voice was low. "No excuses, just results. We're supposed to be better than this." Silence stretched out, broken only by the occasional clink of brass being swept up a few lanes over. The air was thick with frustration, and nothing seemed like it would break the pattern. Then Ethan noticed him. At the far edge of the range, beyond the bleachers where the occasional visitor might stand, an older man leaned on the railing. Tall and lean, but solid. He wore a worn brown jacket despite the heat, and a cane rested against his leg. His hands were clasped calmly over the handle. But it was his eyes, locked on the targets, focused and unmoving, that caught Ethan's attention. "Who's that?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the man. Daniel followed his line of sight. "No idea. Doesn't look like range staff." The old man didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. There was nothing casual about him. He had a presence, still and observant, like someone who had lived this scene 1,000 times before. Probably just another retiree reliving the glory days. Ethan shrugged. Daniel gave a half smile, but it faded the moment the old man turned his gaze toward them. For a split second, it felt like being studied, measured against a standard they couldn't see. "Whatever," Ethan said, trying to shake it off. "We've got work to do." He returned to his rifle, but his hands weren't as steady now. The weight of that silent stare lingered. Daniel didn't look away. He's not just standing there for fun. That's a man who's been on this line before. The instructor's whistle cut through the still air, calling them back. The range was reset. Targets waited. But now there was something else. The stranger's quiet presence pressing into the space between them and the bullseye. They lay prone once more, rifles shouldered. Hearts beating just a little harder. Another round of fire was about to begin, but something in the air had shifted. A new current stirred, unspoken but undeniable. Who was the old man? And why did it feel like he already knew exactly why they kept missing? The next volley began with a sharp crack echoing across the field. Ethan settled into position, cheek against the stock, breath slow and measured. But the instant he pulled the trigger, he knew he'd missed again. Dust kicked up to the left of the target, wide of center. Damn it! He jerked back, yanking the bolt open, the brass casing tumbling to the mat. Daniel, still peering through the spotting scope, didn't even look up. Half a mil left. You overcorrected. Ethan snapped. I'm following the damn charts. Winds from 2 o'clock, light gusts, plus the mirage shift. Everything says this should be on. I'm making the right calls, Ethan said through clenched teeth. Daniel finally pulled his face away from the scope, narrowing his eyes. Then why are we still missing everything? Before either of them could say more, Gunnery Sergeant Ramirez appeared behind them, arms folded, expression carved from stone. You're treating this like it's a math assignment, not a rifle range, he said sharply. Out here, there's no partial credit. You either hit or you don't. Simple as that. Daniel's jaw flexed. Yes, Gunny. Ramirez crouched beside Ethan, his voice dropping low but sharp as a blade. You think some guy across a battlefield gives a damn about your charts and data? You're overcomplicating it. Stop second-guessing and start shooting like you mean it. Yes, Gunny, Ethan muttered, forcing the words out. Frustration churned in his gut like coiled wire. As Ramirez walked off, Ethan grumbled under his breath. Easy for him to say. Daniel caught it. Watch it. He hears that tone. We're running laps until midnight. Ethan sighed and lay back down, fiddling with his scope and trying to steady his breathing. He mentally repeated the basics. Find natural point of aim, slow trigger pull, smooth follow-through. But when the shot cracked, it clipped the target frame, not the bullseye. Daniel groaned, not hiding his dismay. You're killing me, man. Ethan flopped onto his back, staring at the washed-out sky. Tell me you're doing better. Daniel didn't answer right away. He reloaded, checked his settings, exhaled, and fired. The impact landed a full foot low. Ethan laughed bitterly. Yeah, that's what I figured. Daniel's jaw set. Don't get cocky. I'll figure it out. But the truth was, both of them felt the pressure tightening like a noose. They weren't just out here to practice. They were supposed to be among the best. The sniper path wasn't handed out like candy. It was earned with sweat, discipline, and pinpoint precision. And yet here they were, baking under the sun, failing under the eye of a disappointed instructor, and someone else. Ethan looked back toward the bleachers. The old man was still there. Still, watching, his gaze sharp and focused, like he was cataloging every mistake, every moment of hesitation. Ethan looked away, his chest tight with irritation. What's his deal? Just standing there like he's made of stone. Daniel didn't respond at first. He kept his eye on the range, but then said quietly, Ever get the feeling someone's already figured you out, just from the way they look at you? Ethan shrugged. Don't care who he is. If he's got something to say, he can get in line behind Gunny Ramirez. Daniel cracked a slight smirk. I don't know. Man, something tells me if that guy speaks, even Gunny would stop to listen. The instructor's whistle pierced the air. Last 3 shots. Make him count. Both Marines jumped back into position. The stillness around them felt heavy now, like every breath mattered. Every movement. Ethan let the charts go. No numbers. No calculations. Just breath and instinct. He fired. The shot struck just above the target, kicking up a cloud of dust. Close. Frustratingly close, but still not a hit. Daniel fired a few seconds later. His round drifted wide right. The whistle blew again. Ceasefire. Neither Marine said a word. They didn't have to. The silence between them was laced with defeat. Gunnery Sergeant Ramirez shook his head, then barked, "Clear your weapons. You're done." He walked off, disappointment written all over him. Ethan lowered his rifle and covered his face with both hands. "We're screwed." Daniel let out a slow breath, heat rising in his chest. "Not screwed. Just stuck. Big difference." Ethan gave him a sideways glance. "Feels the same to me." Behind them, gravel crunched under slow, deliberate footsteps. But it wasn't the heavy stomp of Ramirez. It was lighter, unhurried, the kind of walk that came from someone completely at ease in their own skin. Daniel turned to look. Sure enough, the old man was approaching, his cane tapping gently with every step. He stopped just outside their firing lane and leaned slightly on the cane, eyes steady as he looked down at the two exhausted Marines. Ethan frowned. "Can we help you, sir?" The man tilted his head, his voice calm but steady. "Maybe the better question is, can I help you?" Daniel sat up straighter, caught between skepticism and curiosity. The man wasn't mocking them. His words carried weight. Not just from age, but from experience. Ethan gave a dry laugh. "We've had enough advice for one day, thanks." The man smiled slightly. "Advice? No, that's not what I'm offering. You're reading numbers, but not the land. And that's the problem." Daniel studied him. "Who are you?" The man shifted his cane slightly, but kept his eyes on the distant targets. "Name's Samuel Briggs. Vietnam vet. Spent a lot of years behind a rifle. I know the look of shooters who are thinking too much and trusting too little." Ethan raised a brow, doubt creeping into his expression despite a flicker of intrigue. "And you think you could do better?" Samuel's smile widened, just a touch. "Son, I don't think. I know." The way he said it, casual, but unshakably certain, made both Marines pause. Whatever snark Ethan had queued up vanished. Something about this man was different. The range had quieted. The training session was officially over. Most of the Marines had already packed their kits and left. Only Ethan, Daniel, and Samuel remained in that quiet lane, a silence settling between them like dust. Samuel shifted his grip on the cane and tapped it once against the ground. When he spoke again, his voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It had the kind of authority that didn't ask to be heard. "You boys are making the same mistake I saw too many times back in '69, Samuel said, his voice calm but firm. "You're blaming the rifle like it's the problem. But the truth? You're not paying attention to the world around you." Ethan let out a short, uneasy laugh, more nerves than humor. "Listening to the world? We're here to shoot, not write poetry." Daniel shot him a quick glance, a silent warning to stay respectful. Then he turned back to Samuel. "What do you mean by that, sir?" Samuel didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, boots crunching on gravel. With a quiet grunt, he crouched down beside them, lowering himself with help from his cane until he was nearly eye level. His knees popped audibly, but he didn't wince. "I mean, you're treating this like a test. Like there's only one correct answer and a red pin waiting to grade you. But shooting from this distance doesn't work like that. It's not just about calculations. You've got to feel it." Daniel raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Feel it?" Samuel nodded. "Look out there." He gestured with his cane, slowly sweeping it toward the distant targets. "What do you see?" Ethan shrugged, unimpressed. "Targets. Same ones we've been staring at all afternoon." Samuel shook his head. "Wrong. Try again. Look closer." Daniel followed the line of the cane, eyes narrowing. The tall grass near the berm moved ever so slightly. Heat rippled off the ground, warping the edges of the targets. A row of pine trees swayed just a bit with each soft gust of wind. "I see movement," he said. "The grass, the mirage, the trees." Samuel gave a small, knowing smile. "Now you're starting to look." That, he tapped his cane on the ground. That's the language of the land. Ballistics matters, sure. But if you're not reading what nature's showing you, you'll always be chasing your shots. Ethan crossed his arms. "But we've been trained to rely on the numbers. On charts. That's how we're taught to shoot." Samuel stood slowly, steadying himself with his cane. And that training? It's good. Don't get me wrong. But those charts? They won't be there in the real world. No neat printouts when you're lying in the dirt halfway across the world. Out there, it's just you, the wind, and what your gut tells you. Daniel glanced at Ethan. Neither one wanted to admit it, but there was something in Samuel's words that hit home. Ethan still looked doubtful. Even if you're right, how do you know you'd do better? It's been decades since you touched a rifle. Samuel chuckled under his breath. You think time makes you forget? Muscle memory sticks. The fundamentals never change. He looked at Daniel. You seem like the type who likes proof. Daniel hesitated, then gave a slow nod. I'd appreciate it. Without a word, Samuel extended a hand toward Ethan. Let me borrow that rifle. Ethan blinked. You want to shoot with this? He gestured to the M40A6. It's nothing like what you used in Vietnam. Samuel's eyes gleamed with a quiet confidence. A rifle's a rifle, son. Steel, glass, powder. The rest is just window dressing. Daniel bit the inside of his cheek. Part of him still had doubts, but another part, the one weighed down by a long day of failure, wanted to see if the old man was for real. Ethan gave him a look. You're not seriously letting him try this. Daniel didn't flinch. Why not? Worst case, he misses, and we're right back where we started. Best case, his voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Reluctantly, Ethan handed over the rifle. Fine. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Scopes dialed for my wind call. Samuel took the weapon with surprising steadiness. He lowered himself onto the mat with care, but without hesitation. Every motion, every shift of his body was purposeful, as if he'd done this 1,000 times before. Daniel knelt beside him out of instinct, falling into his role as spotter. Target at 800. Left lane. Samuel didn't respond immediately. He studied the grass, the trees, the shimmer of heat above the ground. Then, slowly, he adjusted the scope, just a hair, and settled his cheek against the stock. His breathing slowed. Ethan folded his arms, eyes narrowing. All right, here we go. The shot cracked clean. A second later, dust flew, center mass. Dead on. Daniel blinked and leaned in to confirm through the spotting scope. Dead center, he muttered. Perfect shot. Ethan's mouth dropped open. No way. Samuel calmly lifted his head, handed the rifle back without ceremony, and stood like it was just another Tuesday. Told you. The land speaks, if you're willing to listen. Ethan was still sputtering. That had to be luck. Samuel raised a brow, utterly unfazed. Want me to do it again? Daniel, still stunned, nodded. Yeah, do it again. Samuel gave a subtle smile and slid back into position. Another breath. Another shot. Second bullseye, nearly touching the first. The two Marines said nothing. They just stared at the target, then slowly turned toward Samuel. Something had shifted, not just in the sandbags or the scopes, but in them. And Samuel wasn't done yet. Because what mattered more than hitting the target was understanding why he had. Daniel stayed by the spotting scope, heart thudding in his chest. He had just witnessed two flawless shots, back to back, from a man decades removed from military service. It felt unreal, like watching a sleight of hand trick unfold in full daylight. Ethan wasn't as quick to accept it. His eyes stayed locked on the distant target, like maybe, if he glared hard enough, the answer would reveal itself. Two shots don't prove anything, Ethan muttered, his voice low. Samuel rose slowly, steadying himself with his cane. Every movement was smooth, deliberate, not cocky, just confident. The kind of calm that didn't need to prove a thing. He handed the rifle back to Ethan. Your rifle's fine, he said simply. The problem's not the gear, it's how you're using it. Ethan bristled, his pride kicking in. With all due respect, sir, we've trained on this system inside and out. We know the ballistics, the adjustments, the wind tables. We've followed everything by the book. Samuel's face softened, but his tone sharpened just enough to cut through. And that's exactly the problem. The book doesn't pull the trigger. You do. You're waiting for the math to solve a problem that requires your senses. Daniel looked from Ethan to Samuel. So what's the answer then? Samuel didn't respond right away. He turned slightly and pointed his cane toward the far edge of the range. The answer's already out there. You just haven't learned how to see it yet. The words lingered, strange, maybe even cryptic, but they hung in the air with a certain quiet power. Daniel leaned in. Can you show us? Samuel studied them for a moment, eyes narrowing like a teacher gauging whether the lesson would land. I can show you, but only if you're willing to let go of what you think you know. If you can't do that, nothing I say will make sense. Ethan folded his arms. You make it sound like some kind of mystical art. Samuel let out a soft laugh. Not mystical, just forgotten. For a beat, no one spoke. A breeze stirred across the range, rustling the grass, bending the tops of the distant pines. Samuel tilted his head slightly, watching it, like he was reading a language written in motion. Daniel finally broke the silence. You said you were in Vietnam? Samuel nodded slowly. 69 through 71. Central Highlands, mostly. Open country. Thick jungle. All of it. He paused, letting the weight settle. You had to learn fast out there. The wind didn't care about your training. If you couldn't read the land, you didn't last long. Daniel's voice dropped, more curious now than cautious. You were a sniper? Marksman, Samuel corrected. Different name. Same job. One rifle, one shot, and a whole lot of nights wondering if you'd wake up in the morning. His voice dipped to a quieter register. There weren't any second chances. The heaviness in those words silenced them both. Ethan shifted, uncomfortable now, not just because of the failure, but because Samuel wasn't just talking about shooting anymore. Daniel finally asked, So what do we do? Samuel's gaze drifted back to the targets. First, stop looking at the numbers. Ignore the charts for a bit. Just watch. He motioned toward the berm. See the grass? Notice how it's not moving evenly. Left side bends harder. That's where the gust is. The heat rising off the dirt? It's leaning like smoke. That tells you which way the air's drifting. And those trees in the back, watch long enough, and you'll see they sway like a clock's pendulum. Every piece matters. Daniel followed his line of sight, squinting slightly. So, instead of calculating it, you're reading it. Samuel nodded once. Exactly. Trust your gut as much as your glass. The land's talking. Don't tune it out. Ethan rubbed his temples, the skepticism still there, but thinner now. That still doesn't explain how you nailed 2 perfect shots. Samuel met his gaze head-on. Because I stopped trying to think my way to the target and started trusting what I saw. You two are so caught up in proving yourselves, you've forgotten how to shoot. The words hit hard. Ethan felt them land, even if he didn't want to admit it. Daniel glanced at Samuel, then adjusted his rifle. All right, he said. Spot me. Samuel crouched again, focused. Daniel set up carefully. He breathed in, slow and even, trying to match Samuel's earlier rhythm. This time, he let his eyes do more than scan, he observed. The way the grass leaned, the way the air shimmered, the light breeze across his cheek. He adjusted the scope, but not by numbers, by instinct. Then he fired. The round struck just inside the ring. Not center, but the closest he'd come all day. Daniel let out a sharp breath and grinned. I'll take that. Samuel smiled faintly. Closer. You're starting to get it. Ethan scoffed, but his tone had lost its bite. One good shot doesn't mean he's right. Samuel stood again, calm as ever. Maybe not. But keep going this way, and you'll see. Daniel was already chambering another round. Determined. He fired again, and this time, the round punched nearly dead center. His grin widened. There it is. Ethan stared downrange, then at Daniel, then back at Samuel. And for the first time, doubt crept in, not about Samuel, but about himself. He wasn't ready to say it out loud, but something inside was shifting. The rifle lay across his lap. His hand stayed still. His jaw clenched, working side to side like he was chewing on the weight of his own frustration. He looked again at the target, at Daniel, still buzzing from his last 2 shots, and finally at Samuel, standing calm and patient, like a teacher waiting for the last student to come around. Daniel broke the silence. You saw that, Ethan. I didn't change the shot. Just the way I looked at it. He's right. Ethan muttered, almost to himself. You've been chasing lucky shots all day. 2 hits in a row doesn't make him some kind of prophet. Samuel chuckled softly, leaning on his cane with that same unshakable calm. You Marines remind me of us back then, proud, competitive, quick to dismiss anything that doesn't come with a military stamp on it. But pride doesn't put your shot on target. Patience does. Daniel kept his eyes downrange, still focused. What do you want us to do? Samuel lowered himself again with effort, easing into a crouch until he was level with them. You've been treating this rifle like a calculator. I want you to treat it like a conversation. You don't force an answer. You listen first. Ethan finally looked at him, a little defiant. How the hell do you listen to something 800 yards away? Samuel's eyes sharpened. Not the target. The space between you and the target. That's where the truth is. He tapped his cane toward the berm. See the grass? It's not swaying evenly. Watch it closely. If it bends harder on one side, that tells you the wind isn't uniform. If you only read the flag near your position, you're blind to the crosswinds halfway down range. Daniel leaned forward, following Samuel's line of sight. So we're not missing because we're reading it wrong. We're missing because we're not reading enough. Exactly, Samuel said. The world's always shifting. One breeze, one shimmer, one sudden gust, and your round goes off course. You can't just punch numbers and hope they hold. You've got to read what's happening right now. Ethan shook his head, still unconvinced. So it's all instinct now? No more calculations? Samuel didn't flinch. I'm saying it's both. The math tells you what should happen. Instinct tells you what is happening. If you can blend the two, really marry them, you'll stop missing. Daniel was hooked. All right, walk me through it. Samuel shifted his weight. Okay, chamber around. Get comfortable. Breathe steady. Don't rush anything. Daniel lay prone, setting up his position with care. He adjusted his cheek weld, settling his eyes behind the crosshairs. Samuel tapped his cane lightly against the gravel. Now, don't lock in on the target. Soften your focus. Look at the entire scene. What's the grass telling you? Daniel squinted. It's drifting right to left. Stronger movement on the far side. Good, Samuel nodded. Now look at the mirage. It's tilting the same way. That means your round's going to pull left unless you correct for it. Daniel clicked his scope, exhaled slow and deep, and took the shot. The round landed just to the left of the bullseye, closer than he'd been all day. Samuel grinned. Now you're hunting. The excitement was contagious, but Ethan's pride flared up. He grabbed his rifle and stood his ground. All right, old man, he said. If you're so sure, walk me through it. Show me again. Samuel's smile faded slightly, his tone growing firm. Not harsh, but no nonsense. First rule, you listen, not argue. If you're only here to prove me wrong, you'll waste the shot. Ethan swallowed hard, then dropped to the ground. He gripped the rifle and pulled it tight into his shoulder. Fine, I'm listening. Samuel pointed toward the tree line with his cane. Good. Now, don't just glance. Watch. What's it telling you? Ethan narrowed his eyes. The pines in the distance rocked in uneven rhythm, swaying harder every few seconds. It's shifting, like a pulse. Exactly, Samuel said. Those are gusts. Shoot through one, and it'll pull your round wide. It's like throwing a rock in a storm. So you wait. Be patient. Ethan held still, finger resting lightly on the trigger. His breathing slowed. Now, Samuel said, his voice low and steady. The shot cracked across the range. Downrange, the paper jumped as the bullet punched straight through the bullseye. Ethan blinked, stunned. He pulled back from the scope, staring at the hole, then over at Samuel. No way. Daniel burst into laughter and clapped him on the shoulder. Told you. For the first time all day, Ethan cracked a smile. Not smug, not defensive, just pure, unfiltered relief. All right, maybe you are onto something. Samuel leaned back on his cane, nodding once. Not onto something. Just remembering what too many men forget. The world's always talking. You just have to learn how to listen. For a long moment, the two Marines sat in silence, letting the weight of it all sink in. The earlier frustration, the missed shots, the pressure, it all softened into something else. Humility. But Samuel wasn't just teaching them how to hit paper. This was about more than marksmanship. It was about survival, about trust, about learning the kind of wisdom no manual can teach. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was real. The air at the range felt lighter now, less like a place of failure, and more like a classroom, one they were finally ready to learn in. Daniel chambered another round, lowering himself behind the rifle with a clarity he hadn't felt all day. He glanced toward Samuel for a cue, then shifted his gaze downrange. "The grass is bending harder now," he said quietly. "Looks like a stronger gust." Samuel nodded. "Good. You don't need me to tell you anymore. Just trust what you see." Daniel adjusted, steadied, and fired. Dead center. A grin spread across his face. "That's 3 in a row." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Guess it's not just luck after all." Daniel turned, smiling. "Your turn. No excuses." Ethan rolled his shoulders and lay prone again. This time, everything felt different. The target wasn't just some distant dot on the horizon. It was part of a larger picture. The heat shimmered. The grass whispered. The trees swayed in rhythm. It was like the world had been shouting at him all day, and he was finally ready to hear it. But only now did Ethan have the ears to hear it. The rifle cracked, and his shot landed just inside the bullseye. Not perfect, but the closest he'd come yet. He exhaled, half laughing. "Well, I'll be damned." Samuel smiled, just a faint lift of the lips, but it was there. "Told you. It's not about force. It's about rhythm." Daniel arched a brow. "Rhythm?" Samuel leaned on his cane, eyes drifting somewhere far beyond the range. "Back in '70, I spent weeks on a hilltop outside Pleiku. Every day, we'd watch the wind roll through the valleys. Couldn't always see the enemy, but we could see the land move. That's when I learned. The world's got a rhythm. Gusts, shifts, the way the heat dances off the dirt. Once you feel it, you don't fight it. You work with it." The two Marines listened closely, drawn in by the weight of memory in Samuel's voice. He wasn't being dramatic. In fact, it was his calm that made every word land harder. Ethan finally asked, quietly, Did that save you out there?" Samuel's gaze sharpened. "More times than I can count. Men who trusted only their scopes got careless. Men who trusted the world lasted longer." He paused. Not always long enough, but longer. Silence settled in again. The faint crack of rifles echoed in the distance. But here, in their lane, it felt like a whole other world. Daniel cleared his throat. "Gunny Ramirez is going to lose his mind when he sees us shooting like this." Ethan smirked. "Maybe he'll finally stop chewing us out." Samuel chuckled. "Don't bet on it. An instructor's job isn't to be impressed, it's to keep pushing. But he'll see the difference." The whistle blew, signaling another round. This time, Ethan and Daniel moved with a different energy. Not frantic, not frustrated. Focused. One shot after another rang out, closer to center every time. They weren't perfect, but the wild misses were gone. Each round was more deliberate. Every mistake felt like part of the process, not the end of it. After the final shot, both sat up, soaked in sweat, tired, but smiling. Daniel grinned, raising a fist. "Not bad, partner." Ethan bumped it with a shake of the head. "Not bad at all." Samuel stood to the side, cane planted, watching them with quiet pride. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. The results were already speaking. Then he did speak. His voice firm, but warm. "Don't forget what you learned today. The charts, the numbers, they matter. But they won't save you if you forget to trust your senses. Don't get so locked in your head that you miss what's right in front of you." Both Marines nodded. The doubt was gone. The resistance, too. Especially in Ethan, who now felt something shift inside him, deeper than just understanding a technique. He looked at Samuel. "Why'd you even bother with us today?" he asked. "You didn't have to help." Samuel rested both hands on his cane. His expression softened. Because I've seen too many good men fall when they didn't have to. If I can pass on even one piece of what kept me breathing, maybe the next ones won't repeat the same mistakes. Daniel swallowed hard. The words settled on him like a weighted vest. You might have saved us more than just a few missed shots. Samuel's smile returned. Quiet. Sincere. Maybe so. The whistle blew one last time, marking the end of the day. Around them, Marines packed up their gear. Voices rose again, talking, laughing, moving on. But for Ethan and Daniel, something had changed. And Samuel wasn't quite finished. He had one more thing to give. One more truth to leave behind. The sun sank low, stretching long shadows across the range. The heat began to fade. Most of the Marines were gone, headed back toward the barracks. Ethan and Daniel stayed where they were, rifles still on their mats. Both watching Samuel. Waiting. Because they could feel it. He wasn't done just yet. Samuel leaned a little heavier on his cane now. His shoulders sagged with age, but his voice held firm. You boys did good today. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead and nodded. We only hit those targets because of you. Samuel shook his head slowly. No, I didn't pull those triggers. You did. All I did was remind you of something your training forgot. He looked out at the horizon, eyes distant, like he was seeing a battlefield that never quite left him. The hardest thing for young men to accept is that they don't know everything. And the hardest thing for old men to accept is that the world's moved on. He paused, then looked back at them. Somewhere in the middle is where we actually learn from each other. Ethan swallowed. His voice was low. So what's the real lesson? That we've been doing it wrong. Samuel turned to him fully, expression serious, but not angry. The lesson is simple. Don't ever think you're too good to listen. Not to the land. Not to the wind. And sure as hell not to the people who've walked the road before you. He let the silence settle before delivering the final blow. Pride'll get you killed quicker than any bullet. But humility, patience, and respect, that's what keeps you alive. The words hit like a gut punch. No bark. No order. Just truth. Daniel looked down at the dirt, then back up at Samuel. I think I get it now. This was never just about shooting, was it? Samuel's smile was faint, but real. No, it never is. For a long moment, the three of them stood there in silence. No more shots, no more charts, no more proving anything. Just the quiet and the rhythm of the world still moving around them. The only sound left was the wind, just a faint whisper gliding across the open range. Then Ethan spoke, his voice quieter than it had been all day. I'll remember this. Not just for today, but for when it matters. Samuel looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, a full, genuine smile crossed his face. That's all I ever hoped for. A sharp whistle pierced the calm. Gunnery Sergeant Ramirez was heading back their way, clipboard tucked under one arm, eyes scanning the targets. He paused, squinting at the fresh, tight clusters of hits. Well, he muttered, raising an eyebrow. Looks like somebody finally figured it out. Ethan and Daniel glanced at each other, but neither said a word. No need. Whatever happened here, whatever shift had taken place, it belonged to them. Samuel gave a small nod, subtle but knowing, like they were in on something no one else would fully understand. Ramirez didn't press. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he already knew enough. Pack it up. You've got Chow and 20, Alpha Company. He barked, already turning away. Samuel shifted slightly, bracing his cane. I should get going too. Daniel frowned. You sure? You could stick around, maybe meet some of the others. I'm sure they'd want to hear your stories. But Samuel shook his head with a quiet certainty. My story's not what matters. Yours is. I just wanted to make sure you were writing it the right way. Ethan stepped forward and extended his hand. Thank you. Really. Samuel gripped it firmly, stronger than expected. Then he shook Daniel's hand too, looking each of them square in the eyes. Don't waste what you learned today. The land doesn't lie. It'll always tell you the truth if you're willing to pay attention. And when it comes to people, listen twice as much as you speak. That'll take you farther than any rifle ever will. Then, without another word, Samuel turned and began his slow walk back toward the bleachers. His cane tapped a steady rhythm on the gravel, fading with each step, but somehow leaving an echo that would linger far longer than the sound. The two Marines stood watching him go, a shared silence stretching between them. Not awkward, not empty, just full of respect. Finally, Daniel let out a breath. You know, I think today was worth more than all those hours we spent grinding through charts. Ethan nodded, slowly. Yeah, funny how one person, one moment, can change everything. He paused, then added, makes you wonder what else we've been too proud to see. They gathered their gear, slung their rifles over their shoulders, and started the walk back. But it wasn't just another training day burned into their memory. It was something more. They'd remember this day not for the frustration or the missed shots, but for the man who showed up, uninvited, and taught them how to listen. Because sometimes wisdom doesn't come wrapped in manuals or delivered through high-tech optics. Sometimes it shows up wearing an old jacket, walking with a cane, and carrying lessons etched from decades of experience. That's what Samuel Briggs gave them, more than advice, more than technique. He gave them a reminder that true skill isn't just about pulling a trigger. It's about patience. It's about humility. It's about respecting the world and the people who came before you. So if you're watching this and thinking it's just a story about rifles and Marines, think again. Every one of us has our own range, our own targets, our own frustrations, and sometimes all it takes to finally hit the mark is to pause, pay attention, and really listen to someone who's already walked through the fire and made it out the other side. That's the real lesson. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.